Hi there, welcome to this Azure Data Factory tutorial. We all know that in our world data is increasing exponentially, and in the world of big data, raw unorganized data is often stored in relational, non-relational and other storage systems. However, on its own, raw data doesn't have the proper context or meaning to provide meaningful insights to analysts, data scientists, or business decision makers. And in order to gain the insights from such data, we need to do ETL or ELT or data integration projects. And that's what is Azure Data Factory is all about. Let's understand first the agenda of this tutorial. In this tutorial, you would first get to know what is Azure Data Factory, when do you use Azure Data Factory, what are the benefits of Azure Data Factory. Then we will discuss about the different components of Azure Data Factory, and also we are going to discuss how to integrate data with Azure Data Factory. Not only that, we will further discuss linked services, datasets, and data pipelines, where we are going to design a data pipeline, and at last I'm going to present you a demo how you can copy data from your on-premise SQL Server to the Azure SQL Server in the cloud services. So what are you waiting for? Let's get started. Now the very first question comes into our mind, what is Azure Data Factory, also known as ADF? Well guys, Azure Data Factory is a platform that solves data scenarios. For example, you are working in a gaming company and where you are generating enormous amounts of data, and that data is stored at some place. Now you want to generate the insights, you want to analyze the logs of that data, or you want to extract some of the other insights from this data. So in these scenarios, Azure Data Factory is going to help you. It is the cloud-based ETL and data integration service that allows you to create data-driven workflows for orchestrating data movement and transforming data at a scale. Using Azure Data Factory, you can create and schedule data-driven workflows that we call pipelines that can ingest data from separate data stores. You can build complex ETL processes that transform data visually with data flows, or by using compute services such as Azure HD Insight Hadoop, Azure Databricks, and Azure SQL Database. Additionally, you can also publish your transformed data to the data stores such as Azure Snips Analytics for business intelligence applications to consume. Ultimately, through ADF or Azure Data Factory, raw data can be organized into meaningful data stores and data lakes for better business decisions. Now let's see, why do we use it? As I just mentioned, we use it for very complex scenarios where we are handling petabytes of data. For example, any gaming company that's producing petabytes of data, their logs, etc. So to analyze that kind of data, to extract the insights from that data, we use Azure Data Factory. Not only that, we can perform our ELT or ETL or ELTL operations using Azure Data Factory. Now let's see, how does it work? Well guys, first of all, Azure Data Factory provides you code-free ETL as a service. That means you can ingest data from hundreds of data sources using 100 plus native connectors as well as serverless and auto scale. Then you can design your control flows and then data flows. After doing that, you can schedule it and then you can monitor your all the activities. So basically this process is going to happen once you get your data from the data sources. That can be your big data, or that can be your relational, non-relational, on-premise or on-cloud services. Then you have to ingest your data using the pipelines. Then you prepare your data, and after that you can transform and analyze it, and at last you can publish it. Then it's ready for the consumption. Now let's discuss some of the benefits of Azure Data Factory. Using Azure Data Factory, you can get data almost from any number of data sources. And not only that, you can design your code-free data transformation. You would get a visual experience where you just need to drag and drop. You can transform your data, you can load your data, and you can ingest the data as well from any number of data sources. This is also going to provide you better scalability and performance, And it's not only that, it is very cost efficient too. Now let's see the overview of Azure Data Factory architecture. On this screen, you would see the overview of Azure Data Factory architecture, where on the top you can see what is Azure Data Factory, which is a cloud-based data integration service which orchestrates data movement and transformation from a diverse of data sources to your cloud compute resources. You do your data factory integration, then you check what kind of scenarios are there for you, and then you would also see on this screen that how does it actually works. Basically, you have to ingest your data, then you have to transform your data, and then you can publish your data. Also, there are other steps. At the bottom part of your screen, you can see your control flow. Then you have at number 2 your different kinds of activities, pipelines, linked services, etc. Everything we will discuss later in this video one by one as well. So these are the core components of Azure Data Factory. In the core components, you can see we have the linked services. Linked services are nothing but like your connection strings. Whenever you are trying to get the data from any data source, then in order to get the data, you have to establish a connection between them, and that is your linked services, which can be your SQL server, Hadoop cluster, etc. Then you have datasets. So what data you are getting from your data source, that becomes your datasets. And then we have activities. So using activities, we can run, a lot of operations, like we can use our store proc, or we can even copy the data, we can execute one SSIS package, etc. And that all have been done using a pipeline. In the pipeline, we can schedule, monitor, or manage all these transformations. In the next part, we are going to discuss how we can integrate data using Azure Data Factory. Now let's discuss the architecture of BI services. Well, on your screen right now you can see the BI architecture, where you have the different sources or your external data. Then you have to orchestrate this data, like your ingestion, data storage into the data factory. Then we can create cube on the top of that. For that you can use Azure Analysis Services, and also the authentication is going to be done using Azure Data Factory, where you can set a multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, or any other method that you really need to do in your organization. And finally, you can visualize data using Power BI. So this is the BI architecture which you can even use in your own organization. Now over here we discussed orchestration. So what is it? So let's discuss this in detail. What is orchestration? To use an analogy, think about a symphony orchestra. The central member of the orchestra is the conductor. The conductor does not play the instrument. They simply lead the symphony members through the entire piece of music that they perform. The musicians use their own skills to produce particular sounds at various stages of the symphony. So they may only learn certain parts of the music. The conductor orchestrates the entire piece of music and therefore is aware of the entire score that is being performed. They will also use specific arm movements that provide instructions to the musicians how a piece of music should be played. In the same way, ADF can be a similar approach. Whilst it has native functionality to ingest and transform data, sometimes it will instruct another service to perform the actual work required on its behalf, such as a Databricks to execute transformation query. So, in this case, it would be Databricks that perform the work, not Azure Data Factory. Azure Data Factory, or ADF, merely orchestrates the execution of the query and then provides the pipeline to move the data on to the next step or to the destination. Over here, you should also note down, it also provides rich visualizations to display the lineage and dependencies between your data pipeline and monitor all your data pipelines from a single unified view to easily point out issues and set up monitoring alerts. On your screen, you can see that this is a hybrid data integration at a scale, where you have your relational databases and non-relational databases on your left hand side. In the middle, you will see there is a data processing and movement, where you can have different kinds of your databases, open source, big database, or any other relational databases. Then you have your BI tools, that can be any BI tools which can be in cloud or which can be on premises, and also you use them using your VNet or virtual network. So Azure Data Factory orchestrates pipeline activity, workflow and scheduling. So this is the orchestration of your BI system. Now we are going to describe the data integration patterns. That means what are the different data integration patterns? That means your ETL process, ETL tools, evaluation of ETL, modern data warehouse, and advanced analytics workloads. So let's consider them one by one. ETL. In ETL, the very first E is the extract. I have explained this in my previous videos as well, so I'm just gonna briefly explain it over here. During the extraction process, data engineers define the data source. First, you have to identify source details such as the resource group, subscription, and identity information such as key or secret. And then you have to define the data. That means identify the data to be extracted. Define data by using a database query or a set of file or an Azure blob storage name for the blob storage. If you don't know what is Azure storage is, then you can watch the previous videos as well. Then it comes to the T. T means transform. So here you have to define the data transformations. Data transformations operations can include splitting, combining, deriving, adding, removing or pivoting columns. Map fields between the data source and the data destination. You might also need to aggregate or merge the data. So if you have already worked on the ETL process, you already know what is this process. And finally it comes to the load. That means once you get your data, now you have to load into your system or into your data warehouse or into your database. For that, you need to define the destination. Then you have to start the job. Finally, we have to monitor the job. While loading, you should remember that many Azure destinations can accept data formatted such as JSON, file or blob. You might need to write code to interact with application APIs. In order to set the job, test the ETL job in development or test environment, then migrate the job to a production environment to load the production system. And finally, in case of monitoring the job, ETL operations can involve many complex processes. Set up a proactive and reactive monitoring system to provide information when things go wrong. Set up logging according to the technology that will use it. Now, if we talk about the ETL tools, as a data engineer, there are several available tools for ETL. Azure Data Factory provides nearly 100 enterprise connectors and robust resources for both code-free and code-based users to accomplish the data movement and transformation needs. Now I'm going to discuss one very important topic over here, which is evolution from ETL. Azure has opened the way for technologies that can handle unstructured data at an unlimited scale. This change has shifted the paradigm from loading and transforming data from ETL to extract, load and transform, that is ELT. That means we are not going to do just now ETL. What we are going to follow now, we are follow the another approach, that means ELT. That means first we are going to extract the data, then we are going to load into our database or the cloud system or the cloud storage, and then we have to start the transformation of the data, which is a much faster and convenient way to do that. The benefit of ELT is that you can store data in its original format, but be it JSON, XML, PDF or images. In ELT, you define the data structure during the transformation phase. So you can use the source data in multiple downstream systems. In an ELT process, the data is extracted and loaded in its native format. This change reduces the time required to load the data into a destination system. The change also limits resources contention on the data sources. The steps for ELT process are the same as for the ETL process, they just follow a different order, nothing more than that. And as you can see on your screen as well, I have defined this process. What is ETL and how ETL is going on and how ELT is going on. Another process like ELT is called extract, load, transform and load, that is ELTL. The difference with ELTL is that it has a final load into a destination system. That simply means first you have to extract the data, you have to load in the native format, then you have to transform the data, and then again you have to load into your final or your production system. There are two common types of data integration patterns that can be supported by Azure Data Factory. The one is the modern data warehouse workloads, and another is the advanced analytics workloads. A modern data warehouse is centralized data store that provides descriptive analytics and decision support services across the whole enterprise using structured, unstructured, and streaming data sources. Data flows into the data warehouse from multiple transactional systems, relational databases, and other data sources on a periodic basis. The stored data is used for historical and trend analysis. Another part that I just discussed is the advanced analytical workloads. You can perform advanced analytical workloads in the form of predictive or preemptive analytics using a range of Azure Data Platform services. Azure Data Factory provides the integration from the source systems into Data Lake Store and can initiate compute resources such as Azure Databricks or HD Insight to use the data to perform the advanced analytics work. Now you understand what is the ETL or what is ELT or what is ELTL, and also we have discussed the two different kinds of patterns, that is modern data warehouse workloads as well as the Azure analytics workload. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to explain you the data factory process. But before going to the Azure Data Factory process, let's have a look at the differences between ELT and ETL. As you can see from this table, ETL is the data transformation is performed in a staging area. However, in ELT, data transformation is performed in the backend data warehouse or your cloud data warehouse. In ETL, it requires a specialized and independent transformation engine. However, in case of ELT, the backend data warehouse must have the computational and processing capabilities to perform transformations, which already we have in Azure. In case of ETL, it's ideal for small to medium data volumes. However, if you need it for large data volumes, then you should go for ELT. Lastly, the strengths. In case of ETL, it facilitates data quality, data security, and data compliance. And in case of ELT, it provides you greater flexibility and speed when transforming large or humongous amount of data which is unstructured. Now let's discuss about the data factory process. In Azure Data Factory, you can handle your end-to-end ETL or ELT or ELTL process. As you can see on your extreme left hand side, you have the different data sources. Then you ingest those data sources into the Data Lake Store or Azure SQL database or any other Azure storage. Then you can prepare data over there, then you can transform it and analyze it, and finally you can publish it or move it into the production environment. So the very first comes connect and collect. This first step in building an orchestration system is to define and connect all the required sources of data together, such as databases, file shares, or FTP web services. The next step is to ingest the data as needed to a centralized location for subsequent processing. Now another part comes transform and enrich. Compute services such as Databricks and machine learning can be used to prepare or produce transformed data onto a maintainable and controlled schedule to feed production environments with cleansed and transformed data. In some cases, you may even augment the source data with additional data to aid analysis or consolidate it through a normalization process to be used in machine learning experiments as an example. Finally, you publish the data. After the raw data has been defined into a business-ready consumable form from the transformation and enriched phase, you can load the data into Azure Data Warehouse, Azure SQL Database, or Azure Cosmos DB, or whichever analytics engine your business users can point to from the business intelligence tools. Lastly, you have to do the monitoring. Azure Data Factory has built-in support for pipeline monitoring via Azure Monitor, API, PowerShells, or Azure Monitoring Logs, as well as the health panels on the Azure portal to monitor the scheduled activities and pipelines for success and failure rates. Now we are going to understand the Azure Data Factory component, so have a look. In Azure Data Factory, we have basically 4 different components. That means your datasets, your linked services, your activities, and finally your pipelines. So how does that work? Well, an Azure subscription might have one or more Azure Data Factory instances. Azure Data Factory is composed of 4 core components, and as I mentioned, these 4 core components are gonna be your dataset, activity, pipeline, and linked services. Data Factory supports a wide variety of data sources that you can connect to through the creation of an object known as your linked services, which enables you to ingest the data from a data source in readiness to prepare the data for transformation or analysis. So your linked service, you can consider it as your connection string to connect with your data source. With the linked service defined, Azure Data Factory is made aware of the datasets that it should use through the creation of a datasets object. That means once you are extracting the data required for a certain process, that is your dataset. And if we move to the activities part, activities typically contain the transformation logic or the analysis command of the Azure Data Factory's work. Whether you have to do the drive column, you have to split column, you have to multicast, or anything else, that is gonna be part of your activities. Activities also includes the copy activity that can be used to ingest data from a variety of data sources. It can also include the mapping data flow to perform code-free data transformations. It can also include the execution of a stored procedure, Hive query, or pig script to transform the data. You can push data into machine learning model to perform the analysis. It is not uncommon for multiple activities to take place that may include transforming data using SQL stored procedure and then perform analytics with Databricks. In this case, multiple activities can be logically grouped together with the object referred to as pipeline. So, in a pipeline, we can group all of your activities together in a logical group. Now comes to the control flow parameters. Those are another part of the pipeline that we generally gonna manage over there. Finally, you should also note that Azure Data Factory has an integration runtime that enables it to bridge between the activity and linked service objects. That means your compute engine. It is referenced by the linked service and provides the compute environment where the activity either runs on or gets dispatched from. This way, the activity can be performed in the region closest possible. There are 3 types of integration runtime, including Azure, self-hosted, and Azure SSIS. Once all the work is complete, you can then use Data Factory to publish the final dataset to another linked service that can then be consumed by technologies such as Power BI or machine learning. Now, finally, we are gonna discuss about the Azure Data Factory security. Without security, we cannot secure our data, so it's very important to discuss that part too. To create Azure Data Factory instances, the user account that you use to sign in into Azure must be a member of the contributor or owner role or an administrator of the Azure subscription. To create and manage Data Factory objects, including datasets, linked services, pipelines, triggers, integration runtimes, then you must read certain requirements. That means to create and manage child resources in the Azure portal, you must belong to the Azure Data Factory as a contributor role at the resource group level or above. Secondly, to create and manage resources with PowerShell or SDK, the contributor role at the resource level or above is sufficient. What is Data Factory contributor role? Well, when you are added as a member of this role, that is contributor role, you would get the permissions. And what are these permissions? You will get create, edit and delete data factories and child resources including datasets, linked services, pipelines, triggers and integration runtimes. You can also deploy resource manager templates. Resource manager deployment is the deployment method used by the Data Factory in the Azure portal. You will also get access to Manage App Insights alert for a Data Factory. And this role also lets users deploy Resources Manager template for resource group level or above. And finally, you can create the support tickets as well if you have a contributor role. So these are all the Data Factory security concepts that you should know while having your contributor role or while working on the Azure Data Factory. Now let's check the knowledge and see what you have learned so far. Now you will see some questions on your screen. Please try to answer these questions. It is easy to set up Azure Data Factory from within the Azure portal. But before going into there, you need certain details or the information with you. The very first, you need a name. That means what is the name of your Azure Data Factory or Azure Data Factory instance that you would like to give it. Secondly, you would need a subscription. The subscription in which the Azure Data Factory instance is created. After that, you are going to need one resource group, the resource group where the ADF instance will reside. You would also need a version. You have to select whether you want to go for V1 or you can select V2 for the latest features. And after that, you are going to need a location. That means the data center location in which the instance is stored. So these are all the information that you would need to create your Azure Data Factory instance. Now let's head over to the Azure Data Factory portal where I'm going to show you how to do it. So guys, right now I'm on my Azure Data Factory portal. You can also log in into the same portal using portal.azure.com. Once you are going to log in with your credentials, then you would get something like this. If you have already created certain resources, you already have subscription, then your home page is going to appear something like this. Now, our goal is to set up Azure Data Factory instance. For that, you can come over here in the search tab and can search Data Factory. As soon as you would search Data Factory over here, you would get this option Data Factories. So right now, either you can click over here or you would find something like this on your home page. Just click on this. If you have already created any Azure Data Factory, then you would find it over here. Otherwise, you can come over here and just click on this create button. Once you would click on the create button, you would get this another box open to you where you are going to get similar options that you would get previously whenever you are trying to create any service or any instance on Azure portal. So over here under the basics, first you need your subscription, which is this MSTN platform subscription. I'm going to select it. In your case, it can be something different. Then you have to select your resource group and I'm going to select over here BCP Learning. If you haven't created any resource group, you can create over here as well. You just need to click on this create new button and there you can give it a name and click OK. It's going to create a new resource group for you. If you would like to know more what is a subscription, then you can just hover your mouse over this I button. You will get to know. Then if you would like to know what is a resource group, then again you can hover your mouse over here and you would get to know. Then it comes to the region. Over here you can select region as per your choice. But try to select something which is near to your data source so that there would be minimum latency while you are trying to retrieve the data. In my case, I'm going to leave it as it is. Then you have to give it a name to your Azure Data Factory instance. In my case, I'm going to call it BCP ADF. So that would be my name of my Azure Factory. So this would be my name of Azure Data Factory instance. And here you can select the version. If you need the latest features, then always select V2, which is recommended. Otherwise, you can go to V1 as well. Now you would notice over here that it's saying the data factory name is already taken. Choose something different. Maybe previously I have created something and because of that it's not gonna take this name. All the names in Azure portal should be unique. Then you have to be careful while choosing your name. So in our case we can change this name. So let me just change it. So now you can see that the warning message has been disappeared. And now if you want to configure Git over here, you can configure the Git as well. If you want to configure certain networking settings or advanced or tags or anything, you can do it over here. But for our demo purpose, we don't need it. So what we can do, just click on this review plus create button. Here it's going to validate it and you can see that validation failed. Required information is missing or not valid. So we have to look at some of the information which is missing. For that, what we can do, we can come over here and you can see that it's gonna ask me the required information. So what I can say, configure Git later, just select this button and now you can again click this review and create. It's gonna start validating it. And now you can see that validation passed. That means now if I'll click on this create button, it's going to create my Azure Data Factory instance. So let me click over here. On the top ribbon under the notifications, you can see that deployment is in progress. So it would take certain time, and here also you can find out that deployment is in progress. Once it's gonna done, we are gonna come back over here again. Here you can see that your deployment is complete, and now you can go over there. Also, you can pin your newly created Azure Data Factory instance on your dashboard. So let me pin over here. Here you can select whether you want to make it private or shared. So let me just say pin it for the private one. And now I'm gonna click on my home button. On my dashboard, this is my dashboard over here, which is my home page. And here you will find this BCP Azure Data Factory instance, which has been created. So let me click over here. So guys, till now we have set up our Azure Data Factory instance. Now, whenever you need to use the Azure Data Factory instance, you can just click on this Open Azure Data Factory Studio. Here you can start authorizing and monitoring your data pipelines and data flows. If you would like to read more, you can click on this read documentation, where you would get to know a lot of more information, templates, etc. that you can use. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna click on this open button. But before that, please make sure there are certain other settings on your left hand side panel. You can use them. For example, this locks. It's very important. Here you can lock it that nobody else can delete it or write anything in it, something like that. So let me just go to locks, and here you can add locks. You have to give it a name, what kind of lock you want. You have to select it. You want to put any notes, you can do that too. But we are not going to use it right now. So let me go to the overview page over here again, and let me click on this open button for Open Azure Data Factory Studio. So guys, finally we are under BCP Azure Data Factory Studio. That means your Azure Data Factory Studio. Here you can even set up code repo if you would like to. Also over here you would find this very informative visuals which are saying ingest. That means you can ingest any kind of data inside it. You can orchestrate. That means you can create code-free data pipelines. You can transform your data. Also, you can configure your SSIS. Plus, you would get over here pipelines template if you would like to use. And then there are certain other informations. If you would like to use, you can use it. There will be templates and everything. On your left hand side, you would get certain more options where you can author, monitor, or manage. In the last video, we have learned how to create or set up Azure Data Factory. Now, what we are going to do, we are going to learn how to create linked services. Linked services are nothing but your connection strings. That means how you are going to connect with your destination or with your source. For that, you should have one connection between these two. That's how you would get to know from where you can get the data to your Azure Data Factory and how you can load the same data into your destination. So let's head over to my Azure portal, and over there I'm going to let you know how you can do it. Right now I'm into my Azure Data Factory Studio. Over here, if you want to set up your Git, you can do that, but I'm not going to do it. So let's cancel it out. However, if you would expand this left hand side panel, you would find this tab Manage. You have to click over here, and over here you would find the very first option over here, Linked Services. So you have to come over here, click this plus button, and then you would get several options over here. For example, under All tab you will get everything, but if you need anything specific to Azure, you will get it over here. Databases are here. Likewise, there is a file, generic pool, NoSQL, services and apps. So everything is over here. Today I'm going to give you two examples. First, how to create a connection string or linked services for SQL Server which is on premise, and secondly we are going to take another example of Azure portal. That means if you have your blob storage account, so how you can create your connection string for that one. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to cancel it right now. Over here you can see I have already created 3 linked services, but remember that integration runtime services are the key part of these linked services. That means Over here you can see this integration runtime, and there is a definition as well. The integration runtime, or IR, is the compute infrastructure to provide the following data integration capabilities across different network environments. So if you would like to learn more, you can click over here. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you basically there are three kinds of Azure integration services, which I have explained in my previous videos as well. If you want to create any integration runtime which you are going to need in order to complete your linked services, you can come over here, click on this plus icon for new, and here you would see there are two. Actually, in the first one you would see there are two already, Azure and self-hosted. Then there is Azure SSIS one. You can learn more about this, or you can go back and watch our other videos where I have explained all these three integration runtime services. Configure them. Now let's get back to the linked services. Over here, the very first I'm going to talk about the SQL Server one. I have one SQL Server which is my on-premise. Over here you can see this is my server name, and this is running up and fine. Now let's get back to our portal. Over here, let's say we are going to connect with SQL Server. So you can come over here to database, and probably you would find SQL Server over here, which is there. Click continue. You can give it a name over here, and you can select over here what kind of integration service you want. Over here we need self-hosted, so click on plus, click again on self-hosted, continue, and again you can create over here, but I have already created, so like this. When you click on create button, you would get something like this. Over there you would get the first option, click here to launch the express setup. Then you have to launch it, and you have to copy these strings because these are gonna be useful if you are gonna run this manual setup. But we did this express setup, so it didn't ask us. So this is the way you can manage this integration runtime. Once you are gonna get close, now you see that there is an integration runtime too. You can even test the connections over there, and here also you can test. So here you have to provide your server name, your database name, your authentication, what kind of authentication you would like to use, what Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication. Then you have to provide all the other details over here. Once you are gonna done that, then you have to test your connection over here. So let me fill out all these details over here quickly. And this is my database name. Now you see everything is over here, but this is saying okay, this is not working, so I'm gonna select this because I haven't configured yet this integration runtime 2, so I'm gonna use integration runtime 1, which is already working. Now you can test your connection over here. It would take certain amount of time, maybe 5 seconds or maybe 10 seconds or sometimes more, depends upon your internet speed. You can see over here this connection successful. That's how you can validate your new linked service or the service that you have just created. So I'm going to cancel it because I'm not going to use it. So we have just learned how to create a linked service when our data or when our database is on-premise server. Now suppose you have something already on Azure. Maybe that's your Azure SQL Server database, or that can be your Azure Blob Storage. For that, you can also create a new linked services. Over here, I have already created this, and let me just show you. If you don't want to have a look over here, you can just come over here and you can come to Azure, and here you can see this Azure Blob Storage. So you can just say continue, and here I can fill all the details from my Azure subscription. It's going to take every other details from here automatically. You have to also select your storage account. If you haven't created your storage account, you have to create, and then you have to test your connection over here. So it's successful. That's how I have already created one Azure Blob Storage linked service. Now I can discard it again. Now I'm sure you know how to create your linked services or how to create integration runtimes. If you have any question over here, so please don't forget to ask us. Now since my services are already running, I have two linked services, one for destination and one for source. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create one data set. So how to do that? For data set, you have to come under this author tab. Here you would see there is a data set option. So now once you are going to be over here, you have to click on these three dots or ellipses, and click for new dataset. Once you are going to click over here, right now we are going to get data from SQL Server on-premise SQL database. So you have to click on this database tab and over here come down and you would find SQL Server. Click on continue button over here. Now you have to give it a name. So let's give it a name SQL on-premise DB. And here you can use the linked service that we have already created, that is SQL Server 1. Now it would take certain time to load the table names. Now you can select your table names that you would like to load, and that is going to be your data set. For example, in our case, we are going to load the employee table, and then we are going to click OK button. You can also select if you want to import schema or not. So just select OK, and it's going to start creating your data set. Now as you can see that our data set name is SQL on-premise DB. If you would like to change it, we can say employee because it's going to be your employee table. And here you would see this is the connection string where linked service is SQL Server 1, integration runtime is this, table name is this. You can go further and check what is the schema over here for all the fields you will get over here. And if there is any parameter or if you would like to create any parameter, then you can create over here. So that's how you can create a data set when you have already set up your Azure Data Factory on Azure portal. I hope now you have a clear understanding of our data set, linked services, integration runtime services, and how to set up your Azure Data Factory. In this video, you would get to learn how to design your data pipeline in Azure Data Factory. A data factory or Synapse workspace can have one or more pipelines. A pipeline is a logical grouping of activities that together perform a task. For example, a pipeline could contain a set of activities that ingest and clean log data, and then kick off a mapping data flow to analyze the log data. The pipeline allows you to manage the activities as a set instead of each one individually. You deploy and schedule the pipeline instead of the activities independently. The activities in a pipeline define actions to perform on your data. For example, you may use a copy activity to copy the data from SQL Server on-premise to an Azure SQL database. And in this video, we are going to do the same. In this video, you will learn how to copy data from your SQL Server database which is on-premise to the Azure SQL Server database which is in the cloud. Azure Data Factory and Azure Synapse Analytics have three groupings of activities: data movement activities, data transformation activities, and control activities. And in this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to use the copy activity which is under data movement activities. You may try the others as well. An activity can take 0 or more input data sets and produce 1 or more output data sets. And in this diagram, you can see the relationships between pipeline, activity, and data set. In my previous videos, I have already mentioned how you can create a data set, how you can create a linked services, and how you can organize them into your Azure Data Factory. To start this video, in this video, we are going to copy data from SQL on-premise database to Azure SQL database. In order to perform this task, we need SQL Server database, which is going to be your on-premise SQL Server database. Then we also need Azure SQL database. If you haven't created, you have to create that one too. Then we are going to need linked services. And also we are going to need a data gateway that should be installed on your machine or on a server where it's available 24/7 hours. Now let me show you how to do it. The very first, you have to log in into your Azure account, and for that you can navigate to portal.azure.com. Once you are over here, you have to create one Azure SQL database. That is required because that is our destination in this video. I have already created one, and if you can see on my dashboard, there is one BCP Azure SQL DB. Or you can go to directly over here Azure SQL, and here you would find your all the database that you have created on Azure SQL. It can take some time to populate this one. So over here you can see that I have two Azure SQL database. Over here we are going to use this one BCP Azure SQL DB. Once you will click over here, you can get that this is my server name on the top, then this is my connection strings and other informations. You can find it over here as well. Now let me show you my on-premise installed SQL database as well. So over here, the first one, this is my on-premise SQL Server database. Over here, my database name is AdventureWorks DW 2019, where you can see all the tables are over here. I have also connected the same SSMS over here with my Azure SQL database. If you don't know how to connect it, then simply click over here. Here you have to provide your Azure SQL Server address that you can copy directly from here. This is your server name for Azure SQL database, so you can copy it from here. You have to remember your credentials, that is your username and password. So you have to provide over here, like I have already logged in with BCP Connect, and then you have to also mention your password over here. It's gonna populate to log in into your Azure portal, so you have to log in over there as well. So that's how you can do it. Before proceeding further, you have to also create a table over here. In my case, what I'm gonna do, I'm copying this table data, that means this dim account table data, into my Azure SQL DB. For that, what I did, I just right click over here and I said, okay, script it as create to new query. Once you will do that, it's gonna create a script to create a table. Now you can see that you have a script to create a table into your database. You can copy this same script. I'm gonna cut it over here. Then you can come down to your another server where you would like to create this table. Over here, this is my database name, BCP Azure SQL DB. Right click over here and here you can say new script. So once you are over here, you can just right click and paste your script over here. And now we just need to create a table over here. So we are going to create, and on the left hand side, you will see right now there is no table into my this Azure SQL database. So I'll just execute it, but please make sure that you use the same database where you would like to create this table. Over here, this same database is there. Otherwise, you can also select from there on the top. Now we have to simply execute it. So we have already defined a table where we would like to load the data. Now what we have to do, we have to get the data from the source and load it to the destination. Our source is SQL Server database and our destination is Azure SQL database. Now in order to make the connection on Azure Data Factory portal, what we need a data gateway as well. I have already installed a data gateway onto my machine. You can see that over here. You have to just say yes so that you can log in and you can check whether your data gateway is working or not. In organizations, we install the data gateway on a machine which is always online 24/7 hours. For example, you can install it on any virtual machine server so that it's always online and nobody is shutting it down. Over here, you can sign in. Here you can see that this data gateway is online and it's running perfectly fine. So I'm just gonna close it over here. So over here we have seen like how to copy the server name or the database name and how to connect it. So let me go back to now my data factory. So you can see that I have data factories over here. Once you will click over here, it's going to show you the data factory name. This is my BCP Azure Data Factory. If I'll click over here, it's going to show me this Open Azure Data Factory Studio. In this case, what we are going to do, we have to create a pipeline. Now, you can come under this author tab. Here you would find this pipeline. So just come under the pipeline and create a new pipeline over here. So here you would get a couple of options. Either you can make a folder and in the folder you can keep like similar pipelines, whichever you would like to. Otherwise, there are two options mainly. One, new pipeline, another would be your pipeline from template. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a pipeline from the template. So just click on this one and here you would find a lot of templates. You can choose any of the templates to create your pipeline. And what we are going to do in this video, we are going to copy data from SQL Server on-premise to the Azure SQL database. Here you can see that we have this template which is saying copy data from on-premise SQL Server to SQL Azure. So click on this one and then you have to click continue button. Once you click on this continue button, you would get this interface over here where you have to define certain things. For example, the very first, for destination, that is our Azure SQL database dataset, you need one linked service which we have already created and this is the one. Now for second one, For your data source dataset as well, you need another link service. That means our SQL Server on-premise one. So here I have this one. Now you have selected both. Now you can start using this template. If you would like to see more documentation, you can click over here and you can go further. Now just click on this button, use this template. Once you have this template, it's going to show you template validation output, and both have been validated. So you can close it over here. If you would like to change the name, you can change the name. Also, you can define some of the description over here. And then there's again documentation link. If you would like to add any annotations, you can do that over here. Now what we are going to do, we have to copy data from SQL Server on-premise database to the Azure SQL database. So in order to complete that, first you have to click on this one. As soon as you would click over here, it's going to ask you certain information. You have to provide inputs over here, and you can leave it certain other times, or if you would like to change any of these, you can change it, like for example your timeout or retry interval, etc. Now second comes to the source. Over here you can select your data source, which one is your data source, whether it's your SQL Server on-premise DB employee, or if you would like to create any other. So you have to basically select over here, and you can create a new as well over here. So you have to just select like, okay, I need my SQL Server, which is my on-premise. So you can select this one. Then you can continue over here. So basically you are setting the properties over here. You have to just select the service, which is your this one. Then you have to load the tables over here. So the table that you would like to add, you can just say, okay, dim amount is my table that we would like to add. And you can even give it a name. Let's say SQL Server dim amount. This is the name I'm giving it to this one. And then if you would like to go to some advanced options, you can go there, but we really don't need to. Just click OK, and it's gonna create one data set for you. Now you can see that your data set is SQL Server dim amount. Next part is you have to sync this data. That means you have to load data into your destination. So just click sync. In the sync part, you have the right behavior. So whether you want to do insert or upsert or maybe store procedure. So you can do that. Again, you can create a new over here. That means if you would like to create any new table or something else, then you can define over here. What we can do, we can just click on this one, and here we can load our table where we would like to add the data. So we have already created this table. Before loading the data, you have to create the corresponding tables as well. And the schema, you have to load the schema as well. So here you have to click the import schema so that you can see what are all the columns and what are the types of data, etc. over there. It's done. Now third part comes the mapping. Mapping is the most important one. You have to import the schema so that you can map all the fields over here, like which column should map to the which column into your destination table. If you would like to delete any of the column over here, you can just select and delete it. If you want to add a new mapping, you can do that too. Or if you want to clear, you can reset. So all the options are there, but please make sure you check all these options before running this pipeline. Now coming into the settings, so you would get first the notification about the cost that is going to incur while you have created all these resources. And there are some of the properties if you would like to create, you can do that, but we really don't need it. So far, we have created our linked services, we have created a data set, then we have created a pipeline where we are going to use the copy activities behavior. And in this one, we have defined our source as the SQL Server database, and the destination is our Azure SQL database. Once everything is done, you can even debug it. That means whether it's working or not. And in order to check that, you have to click on this debug button. So what we can do before running the debug, you can come over here, and here in this database where we have already created one table, that is our Azure SQL DB, we are going to check whether that table has something or not. And here you can see that there is no data at all. Now I'm going back to my portal, and over here I'm going to run this debug mode. This debug mode basically going to run exactly the same script. While you are going to work into your production environment, you should create one staging database where you can first debug it. If it's working, then only you are going to move into the production one. So this debug mode is basically going to run this pipeline. So let me just click on debug. And if you would come over here, at the bottom, you can see that its name, type, run start, duration, status, everything is going to be mentioned over here. You can check it. Otherwise, you can also click over here. You can see what is your input, and not only input, you can also see the voucher. There is a voucher where you can see, okay, what is the data being copied, what are the different parameters are working over here, etc. Now you can see its status is succeeded. That means we have copied the data from SQL Server on-premise database table to the Azure SQL database. Now let me go back over here, and here let me just try to execute this script again, and here you can see we have all the data already over here. This means using Azure Data Factory pipelines, we have successfully copied the data from SQL Server on-premise to the Azure SQL DB. Once you are going to come back over here to the portal, if you would like to make these changes, you have to publish all these changes, and it's going to show you what are all the elements that you have already created and which are pending changes. So you can do that. So you have to just click on publish button, but we are not going to use it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cancel it, or let's just publish it. So it's going to publish. Please don't forget to check your notifications over here, and you can see that it's being published. So let's close it. First, you have to create your linked services. After that, you have to create your data sets, and then you have to create a pipeline. And pipeline you can create over here under the author. You can come to this part where you can have this pipeline, and here you can create the pipelines from the templates or a new pipeline. Now guys, it's time for knowledge check. So these are the questions. You can pause your screen and have a look and help me to answer these questions.